I was shown a vision. A gate of living gold trembled with light, then closed with a sound that shook the foundations of time itself. The echo rolled through creation like thunder beneath water. In that vibration, I heard a truth as ancient as the soul. A voice spoke within me. Watch closely, it said, for this is not the story of two alone. This is the mirror of mankind. The light of Eden faded like the last breath of a dying Sunday. I saw trees bowing as if in mourning, flowers folded into silence. The wind itself carried sorrow. And there, at the threshold between eternity and exile, stood the first man and woman. Their eyes once mirrored divine fire, but now they reflected fear. Their bodies trembled in a world that no longer welcomed them. What had once been soil of blessing became hard beneath their feet. The sky dimmed. The presence was gone. And in the hollow space where God's voice had once spoken, I could hear only the sound of their breathing. That was the true loss. Not the garden, not the fruit, but the silence, the distance between man and God, the ache of separation that would echo through every birth, every prayer, every generation. Then the gates sealed behind them. When they closed, time began. I felt it unfold like a scroll of sorrow. I understood that this exile was not punishment alone, it was purpose. Humanity had to walk through darkness to remember the meaning of light. Every tear shed outside Eden became a seed of wisdom. Every step westward was a movement toward remembrance. I followed their path in spirit. They walked into the setting sun, westward always, their shadows stretching long upon the barren earth. I felt the chill of that wind, the loneliness that wrapped around them like night itself, and then the vision widened. I saw other feet, darker feet, bound in chains, walking the same direction centuries later. I saw ships rising and falling upon violent waters. I saw cries that reached heaven yet found no answer. The exile had repeated itself. The wound of Adam had bled into history. I asked within the silence, why west? Why into the dark? And the voice replied, calm and unwavering, because the soul must journey into shadow before it can return to dawn. The west is not the end. It is the place of remembering. The earth trembled beneath that revelation. I saw continents forming, rivers carving their paths, mountains rising like silent witnesses to divine intention. The voice continued. Eden was never behind them. It was within them, buried deep beneath fear, beneath guilt, beneath the dust of forgetfulness. The pilgrimage of man is not to find God outside, but to awaken the Eden that still breathes within. Not a land, but a heart. Its soil shimmered with divine memory. I saw hands of light shaping the first man from its clay. I felt the breath of the Creator moving across its red earth. Africa was not the afterthought of creation. It was the cradle of covenant, the birthplace of form and faith. But I also saw the coming of empires, iron, marble, and arrogance. They came speaking of heaven, yet built kingdoms for themselves. They took the scroll and forgot the spirit. They raised altars of conquest and called them cathedrals, yet beneath their feet the truth still pulsed like a buried river. The voice said again, what is written cannot be erased. The spirit guards its own. I was then carried to the banks of the Nile. The river glowed with a silver fire, flowing as if through the veins of time itself. On its shores stood scribes clothed in linen, carving prayers into stone. Each symbol was a seed of remembrance. Beneath the sand I sensed the resting place of a hidden book. Its breath was older than the pyramids. Its words shimmered in the unseen realm. The book of Adam, the book of beginning, the book that spoke of what Genesis veiled. When I touched its pages in vision, they trembled like a living pulse. The ink itself seemed to breathe. I felt not merely history, but memory, not knowledge, but awakening. A current of light passed through me, and I understood. This was not a record of the past, it was the echo of the soul's origin, the story beneath the story, the exile and the return, the wound and the wisdom intertwined. And as the vision faded, the voice whispered one last time, remember this, the gates of Eden closed in the east, but they will open again in the west, for the journey that began in exile will end in restoration. What was lost will be remembered. What was broken will be made whole. And within every heart that still seeks the light, the garden waits. I saw the desert open before me. It was vast, hollow, and trembling beneath a pale sky that knew no mercy. The light of Eden was gone, and in its place hung a silence so heavy that even angels wept. I beheld Adam and Eve standing at the threshold of that emptiness, their forms dimmed by grief, their spirits wrapped in the cold garment of exile. A voice said within me, "This is the cave of treasures, the first dwelling of the fallen yet beloved creation." I entered with them in spirit. The cave was dark and wet, its walls breathing with the memory of sorrow. Water dripped, like tears from unseen stones. Every echo carried the sound of loss, and Adam fell upon his face, his voice breaking the silence. What is this stone compared to the trees of Eden? What is this darkness compared to the light of his presence? His cry pierced heaven. I felt its vibration move through the ages, for that was the first prayer born of pain, the first human longing for God's return. I saw Eve beside him. Her hands trembled as she touched the earth, once soft beneath her feet, now cold as judgment. Her eyes searched the heavens, but the garden's glow was gone. She whispered, "Has he forgotten us?" And the voice that guided me spoke, "No, he hides that you may seek. He withdraws that you may remember." The cave was not punishment. It was preparation. Every exile hides within it the seed of awakening. The first night was long. No moon, no star, no echo of wings, only the breath of two souls learning the weight of mortality. They clung to one another for warmth, yet each carried within a separate grief. I saw the serpent outside, watching, whispering. He delighted in their tears. He thought their separation from light meant his victory. But even then, unseen to him, the eternal was shaping redemption. I was shown the cave in layers of meaning. Its stone walls were the boundaries of the human heart, its darkness the ignorance of divine memory, its damp air the residue of fear, and the small fire they lit in the corner flickered as the first symbol of faith, light born from loss, flame born from fall. Then I was taken beyond the cave. I saw the land stretching wide and barren, the wind cutting like glass. The voice said, "Behold the world outside the presence. Every hardship, every shadow, every hunger began here." Yet I also saw another truth. The soil that had cursed them was the same soil that would one day bear the cross. The tears they shed were the same waters that would cleanse generations. Nothing was wasted. Even exile was a hidden mercy. Adam rose after many hours. His eyes, though filled with sorrow, carried a faint light. He spoke to Eve, "We will not die in this darkness. He will remember." And the heavens trembled, for faith had been spoken where despair once ruled. I saw them begin to build, stones stacked upon stones. It was not a garden, but it was home. They called it the Cave of Treasures because within it they placed what little remained of Eden, a leaf that had not withered, a branch still fragrant with divine scent, and a handful of earth that had once been blessed. These they guarded as prophecy, believing that one day the presence would return to walk with man again. I saw centuries roll like clouds. The cave endured. Generations came to it seeking signs. Some found peace, others found only shadows. Yet the voice reminded me, the cave is not a prison but a mirror. Every soul must enter it to find its true reflection. Then the vision widened. I saw the same cave repeating itself through time. I saw men in chains, women in sorrow, prophets in solitude, nations in bondage. Each was a reflection of that first exile. And in each, the same choice remained, to despair in darkness or to kindle light within it. The cave was also a promise. The voice said, "What begins in stone will end in spirit. What hides in shadow will one day blaze with glory." I felt a pulse move through the earth, as if creation itself waited for the return of its maker. And in that moment I understood. The Cave of Treasures was not only the first home of Adam and Eve, it was the first altar. It was where man learned to pray without sight, to believe without touch, to love without proof. It was where humanity first began to become divine again. The cave still calls, Its walls still echo the sound of awakening. Every time a soul kneels in sorrow and lifts its face toward unseen light, the cave of treasures opens once more, and the same presence that watched over Adam now whispers again, I am here, even in your exile. I have never departed. The darkness you fear is only the shadow of my wings. The air in the cave grew still, as though the earth itself was holding its breath. The flame that Adam had kindled flickered low, casting a trembling light upon the walls. The silence was not empty. It was alive, waiting, listening. Then I was shown the movement of a shadow outside the entrance, subtle at first, then gathering shape like smoke, condensing into form. The same voice that guided me whispered, Behold, the adversary has returned. He is never far from those who seek light. I saw him not as the serpent of the garden, but as something older, colder, patient in malice. His beauty was dreadful, for every fallen thing still remembers the glory it lost. He had watched Adam's prayer. He had heard Eve's tears. He had seen the small flame of faith that refused to die, and that flame enraged him. For darkness cannot bear the smallest light that dares to endure. I watched as he called his host, spirits like mist without mercy. They gathered above the cave like storm clouds without rain. The earth trembled. The stones groaned. Adam lifted his eyes and felt the air change. He said to Eve, Something moves against us. And the ground beneath them began to shake. From the mountain above, a boulder, vast and jagged, broke loose. It fell like judgment, roaring toward the cave's mouth. Eve cried out. Adam covered her with his body. But before the stone could crush them, it split. It broke in two as though an unseen hand had cleaved it midair. The pieces crashed to the earth, scattering dust and light. The voice within me spoke, This was the first deliverance. The shadow sought to destroy, but heaven preserved the seed of promise. I understood. The splitting of the stone was prophecy. It whispered of another dawn, when another stone would roll away, and another exile would end. For every fall contains the seed of its own redemption. The enemy withdrew for a time, but evil is not idle. It shifts its shape. What it cannot conquer by fear, it deceives by beauty. Days passed. Adam and Eve began to build again. They fasted, they prayed. They learned to listen to the silence. For in that silence, God still moved. Yet one morning, as the river near the cave glowed with early light, I saw the water shimmer. Figures rose from its surface, radiant and graceful. They looked human, yet not. Their eyes gleamed like polished onyx. Their voices flowed like honey over water. They called out, Children of the dust, come to us. We are blessed. We have found joy. We dwell in beauty. Come, be like us. Adam felt the pull within him, a longing that wrapped around the memory of what he had lost. Eve, too, heard the melody and wept, for it reminded her of the music of Eden. The voice beside me said, They are not what they seem. These are the fallen clothed in charm. They offer the likeness of heaven, but carry the breath of death. I saw the truth within them. Their beauty was a disguise. Their voices were snares. They sought to lure Adam and Eve into covenant before divine time had ripened. For Satan knew the pattern of creation. He understood that what begins before the appointed hour ends outside of blessing. To take without asking is to lose what could have been given. Adam stood near the cave's entrance. The air shimmered. Desire wrestled with memory. The spirit of doubt whispered, Did God truly say wait? And his heart trembled. The temptation was not lust alone. It was the deeper sin of impatience, to seize destiny rather than receive it. I felt his struggle as if it were my own. Every soul must pass through that same fire. Every heart must decide whether to reach or to kneel. And Adam remembered. The last time he reached too soon, the gates had closed forever. So he fell to his knees. He pressed his face to the ground. He prayed. He wept. He called upon the name that had not yet been spoken aloud since Eden, and the light that had hidden in silence stirred. It wrapped around them like dawn breaking through stone. The illusions fled. The river stilled. The figures vanished like smoke in wind, and the voice said, This is the mystery of restraint. For the one who waits within the will of God holds power greater than the one who grasps outside it. Adam rose from prayer transformed. His eyes carried clarity. His spirit carried peace. He said to Eve, "We will not move until he speaks. We will not act until heaven moves first." And the voice that had guided me whispered, "This was the first covenant of patience. The seed of obedience was sown in the soil of exile." I saw how that same temptation still moves across ages. It changes its form, but not its purpose. It no longer appears as shimmering maidens. It now hides in ambition, in desire for fame, in the hunger to be seen, in the pursuit of false light. The enemy still whispers, "Take it now. You deserve it. Why wait for God?" But the law of heaven remains. Timing is holy. The moment outside divine order becomes a curse wrapped in beauty. Every soul that rushes into what looks like blessing without the voice of the eternal finds itself once again outside the garden. The serpent's greatest weapon has always been early desire, to make the fruit look right before its time, to convince the heart that waiting is loss. Yet every waiting soul is being refined into wisdom. I saw the cave once more. Adam and Eve slept beside their small fire, and around them unseen stood the guardians of light. Their swords were flame, their faces veiled, their presence fierce with peace. The voice said softly, "They do not know it, but they are protected. The lesson has been learned. The serpent will return, but they now know the path of prayer." The vision dimmed. Only one phrase remained ringing within me. Patience is the first armor of the Spirit. Then the light withdrew, and I was left in silence that hummed with the memory of obedience. The days in the cave lengthened. Time began to weave its slow rhythm across the hearts of Adam and Eve. Their prayers deepened, their hunger turned to revelation, and their silence became a language only heaven could understand. I was shown the moment when patience ripened into purpose. The voice said, "Now the appointed hour draws near. What was withheld shall be revealed in order." The air shimmered with unseen presence. I saw angels descend, robed in radiance that neither shadow nor flame could touch. In their hands they carried gifts, wrapped not in gold but in light itself. One held a crown of gold, another a censer filled with incense, and a third a vial of myrrh, whose fragrance carried the memory of eternity. The leading angel spoke, "Adam, arise. Your waiting has not been in vain. Heaven remembers obedience. Present these gifts to your companion, for covenant begins where impulse ends." Adam trembled, not from fear but from awe. Eve knelt beside him, her eyes wide as dawn breaking through clouds. The angel continued, "Gold for your worth, incense for your worship, myrrh for your sacrifice. These are the symbols of divine union. What you bind in reverence will echo through generations." Adam took the gifts with trembling hands. He turned to Eve and said, "I give these not as man gives to woman, but as soul to soul under the gaze of the eternal. You are not my possession, but my prophecy." The cave filled with light that pulsed like a living heart. The angels spoke again, "Let this be the first covenant of the earth." Marriage is not born of loneliness, but of divine reflection. It is the mirror through which creation remembers its source. I understood as I watched. Their joining was more than companionship. It was an act of restoration. Through it, the balance broken in Eden began to heal. Obedience opened what desire had closed. The serpent's deception had sought to twist love into lust, purpose into possession, but heaven reclaimed what hell had distorted. I saw the moment their hands touched. The light flared, then steadied, forming a ring around them. The angels withdrew, their wings brushing the edges of time. The voice within me said, "This is the mystery of sacred order. Every covenant made under divine timing becomes eternal. Every union outside of it turns to dust." Adam and Eve remained in prayer long after the light faded. Their hearts were steady, their souls aligned. They had learned that the holiness of waiting births the permanence of blessing. The earth outside began to bloom again. Small blades of green broke through the dust near the mouth of the cave. The voice said, "When obedience takes root, creation responds." I saw in vision the same law unfolding through the ages. The sons of men would forget it. They would rush where angels pause. They would seek unity without purpose, covenant without surrender, pleasure without prayer, and the world would call it freedom, though it led to chains. Yet the memory of Adam's patience would remain hidden in the heart of every soul. Every true love, every faithful bond would carry its echo. Heaven's pattern never dies. It only waits to be remembered. Adam looked at Eve and said, "Let us build from this promise." Together they raised an altar of stone at the mouth of the cave. Upon it they laid the three gifts. The smoke of incense rose in spirals that touched the unseen sky. The voice said, "Worship is not ceremony. It is remembrance. It is the turning of exile into home." The flame upon the altar flickered and steadied. The scent of myrrh filled the air. And I saw in the fire's glow the shadow of another altar, another offering, another Adam who would come to restore what the first had lost. The vision trembled with prophecy. What began in obedience here would one day be fulfilled in sacrifice there. The union of Adam and Eve became a sign written into the fabric of time, a declaration that love born of divine order can sanctify even the ruins of a fallen world. The angels' voices faded, leaving only the rhythm of breath and the sound of life beginning again. I heard the eternal whisper, "This is the pattern: obedience, covenant, creation. Repeat it, and the world shall heal." Then the light folded back into silence, and I was left watching the smoke rise from the altar like a promise unending. The altar still burned when the vision shifted. Time moved forward, slow and solemn. From the covenant of Adam and Eve came two sons, each carrying the echo of their parents' faith, yet divided by the secret war that still lingered in the dust of exile. The voice said, "Now witness the battle that begins not in the field but within the heart. For every covenant births both blessing and testing. I beheld Cain and Abel standing before the same altar their father had built. The smoke of offering rose in twin spirals. Abel's offering was pure, the fruit of obedience. Cain's was heavy, the fruit of ambition. The difference was not in what they brought, but in how they gave. One sought communion, the other sought control. I heard Cain's heart whisper, "If I give, I must be seen." And the whisper that answered him was the same serpent that once breathed beneath the trees of Eden. The voice of pride clothed itself in reason. It said, "Your brother's fire burns higher than yours. You deserve the same flame. Take it." The heavens watched in silence. Abel prayed, his eyes fixed on the presence. Cain's gaze shifted to his brother. Envy grew like shadow. The offering that should have ascended became smoke of resentment. God spoke softly to Cain, "If you do well, will you not be accepted? But if you do not, sin lies at the door." The words were warning, not wrath. But Cain's ears, already filled with the noise of self, could not hear. I saw the moment he turned away. His hands trembled. His breath grew shallow. The voice that once deceived his mother now whispered again, "Take what should have been yours." The ground drank the first human blood. The earth itself groaned as though wounded. Abel fell, his eyes still open toward heaven, and Cain stood alone in the silence that followed, trembling at what he had become. I felt the sorrow of creation. The first murder was not born from hatred, but from misdirected worship, the desire to possess what can only be received. The voice beside me said, "Every generation repeats this story. The war between desire and obedience never ended. It only changed its names." I saw nations rise, faiths divided, hearts corrupted by the same hunger to hold the fire of God without surrendering to his hand. Cain's mark was not only on his skin, but upon the human soul. It was the imprint of will ungoverned, of passion unpurified. Yet even there, mercy remained. God did not destroy him. He set a mark to preserve him, to remind the world that even in judgment, compassion endures. The voice said, "Understand this. Justice without mercy is not divine, and mercy without truth is not holy." I was shown the face of Adam when he heard of Abel's death. He fell to the ground and cried, "The blood of my son calls from the earth." Eve wept beside him, her tears falling upon the soil where life first began. The garden that once bore fruit now bore grief. But even in that grief, I saw a strange light. The death of Abel became the seed of remembrance. It taught humanity that disobedience births death not by decree but by design. Sin is not a punishment. It is a separation from harmony. The voice continued, Cain's rage was not against his brother alone. It was against the divine order itself. He could not bear that holiness cannot be owned. I watched the centuries that followed. The blood cried through time. Every war, every betrayal, every injustice was a ripple from that moment when envy overcame reverence. Yet hidden beneath the sorrow, the covenant still breathed. Adam and Eve bore another son, Seth, and through him the line of light continued. The angels who once guarded Eden now guarded this remnant, unseen, yet unyielding. The voice said, Mark this truth. Obedience is the altar that endures when passion burns itself to ash. Those who walk in reverence will always rebuild what the proud destroy. I saw Cain wandering across barren lands, building cities of stone to quiet the echo of guilt. But the echo followed him, as it follows all men who try to bury their conscience in noise. I saw Abel in the realm of peace, clothed in radiance, singing the first lament that became the music of heaven. His song was not vengeance. It was forgiveness, and the melody of it reached even into Cain's darkness, a whisper that said, Love still remembers. The vision stilled. The cave of treasures faded. Only the altar remained, its flame steady, its smoke rising. The voice said, From obedience came covenant, from covenant came conflict, and from conflict must come redemption. The story is not finished. Watch now as the sons of light rise upon the mountain, for the battle between spirit and flesh has only begun. The generations of Seth rise like morning light upon the darkened earth. They were called the sons of God, not by name alone, but by nature, for their hearts still carried the breath of Eden. They dwelt upon the holy mountain, where the air was pure and the sound of prayer moved like wind among the trees. Their faces shone with quiet strength, for they walked in remembrance. They built no walls, for they feared no enemy. Their eyes looked upward, not outward, and every dawn the mountain echoed with songs that called the presence near. The voice said, These are they who keep the covenant. They guard what remains of light within a world that drifts toward shadow. I beheld their ways. They labored not for gold or conquest, but for communion. They tilled the soil with reverence, knowing the ground still held the memory of God's touch. They gathered each evening around the altar that Adam had built. The flame burned low, but its glow never died. It was the last ember of Eden, and through it the covenant endured. Yet below the mountain another seed had grown. The line of Cain, restless and unrepentant, built cities upon the plains. Their walls rose high, their altars smoked with strange fires. Their music filled the night with rhythms that stirred the flesh but silenced the spirit. I saw iron forged into weapons, and gold shaped into idols. They learned the craft of seduction and the art of dominion. They named their children after the stars, but forgot the maker of the heavens. The voice said, This is the valley of Cain, where desire is thrown and memory is dust. For many ages the two worlds remained apart. The sons of Seth kept their watch above. The children of Cain danced below. Between them stretched the great divide of devotion and deceit. But temptation is patient. It waits for weariness to open a door. I saw the beginning of their fall. It did not come with armies or thunder. He could not bear that holiness cannot be owned. I watched the centuries that followed. The blood cried through time. Every war, every betrayal, every injustice was a ripple from that moment when envy overcame reverence. Yet hidden beneath the sorrow, the covenant still breathed. Adam and Eve bore another son, Seth, and through him the line of light continued. The angels who once guarded Eden now guarded this remnant, unseen, yet unyielding. The voice said, Mark this truth. The melodies rose again, this time joined by laughter and the sound of women's voices from the valley. The daughters of Cain adorned themselves in beauty. Their garments shimmered. Their faces glowed with false light. They sang songs of freedom, of joy without reverence, of love without covenant. The wind carried their voices upward, soft as whispers yet heavy as chains. The young men of the mountain grew curious. Their prayers became shorter. Their songs of devotion weakened. It came as music on the wind. Jubal, a son of Cain, was skilled in string and breath. He crafted harps that could summon longing and flutes that could bend emotion. His melodies floated upward like invisible mist, carrying the fragrance of pleasure to the mountain's edge. The sons of Seth paused in their worship. They listened. The voice said, "Music is a mirror. It reflects the soul that plays it. When born of light, it ascends. When born of shadow, it ensnares." They forgot the altar, the covenant, the voice that once called their names. They joined in the feasts. They danced. They drank. They married without blessing. And from those unions came the Nephilim, beings of great stature but empty heart. Their strength was immense. Their wisdom darkened. They ruled by might and pleasure. They built towers that reached toward the heavens, not to honor God, but to rival him. The earth shuddered beneath their weight. Violence filled the land like floodwaters before rain. The voice said, "Behold the corruption of covenant. When holiness mixes with rebellion, the offspring of both becomes ruin." I saw angels weep. The mountain grew silent. The flame of Adam's altar flickered and dimmed. Only a few remained faithful, holding the last spark of obedience. And in the valley the laughter of men turned to the cry of conquest. The Nephilim devoured the fruit of the earth and the innocence of nations. Blood stained the rivers. The air thickened with despair. Yet even then, I sensed mercy moving like a hidden current beneath the chaos. God does not abandon what he formed. He allows the flood to cleanse, but never to erase the promise. The vision showed me the heart of Noah, descendant of Seth, pure in a world drowned in pride. The voice said, "Light can survive in any generation if even one soul remembers." I saw Noah gazing toward the mountain that was now veiled in smoke. He wept for what was lost, but his tears became prayers. Heaven heard him, and the covenant that began with Adam found its next vessel in him. The voice continued, "The sons of God fell not because they desired evil, but because they forgot wonder. They turned revelation into curiosity and holiness into habit." I understood then that every age faces its own descent. The melodies of Cain still rise. The daughters of desire still call. The Nephilim still walk, not as giants of flesh, but as powers that rule minds and systems. The flood has changed its form. It is no longer of water, but of distraction, of noise, of the constant pull away from stillness. Yet the same law endures. The mountain still waits. The altar still burns for those who remember. The voice said, "Each soul must choose again between ascent and descent. The climb is steep, but the view is eternal. The fall is easy, but it leads to forgetting." I saw the last ember of the altar reignite as Noah knelt. The fire rose, steady and golden, defying the darkness below. And the voice concluded, "From fall shall come cleansing. From cleansing shall come covenant renewed." The flood approaches not to destroy, but to restore. Watch, for the next chapter of grace has already begun. Then the vision folded into silence, and the earth waited beneath the weight of prophecy. The flood came as silence before thunder. The skies darkened, heavy with judgment and mercy entwined. The mountains trembled beneath the weight of water yet unborn. The voice said, "What men call wrath is often mercy in disguise. When corruption fills the earth, cleansing becomes compassion." The people of the valley laughed as clouds gathered. They mocked the warning. They called Noah mad, builder of emptiness, dreamer of storms. But the ark was not madness, it was memory carved into wood. Each plank was a prayer, each nail a promise. And the breath that filled its frame was the same breath that once stirred the dust of Adam. I saw Noah's hands, blistered and bleeding, shaping the covenant's new vessel. His sons labored beside him, weary but faithful. Their wives gathered the provisions of life, grain and oil, and the tender roots of the earth. Animals moved toward the ark as if summoned by remembrance. They did not come in fear, but in obedience, for creation still knew its maker even when man forgot. The rain began as whispers, then it grew into weeping, then it roared. The heavens broke open. Water fell like justice. The ground split, releasing rivers of the deep. The valleys drowned in their own noise. Cities vanished beneath waves that carried no malice. The ark rose, creaking but steady, lifted by the same hands that split the boulder before Adam's cave. I was shown the earth as a single vast sea, gray and endless. Above it drifted the ark like a heart still beating amid the flood. The voice said, "Behold the mercy of destruction. What dies in the water is not life, but corruption. What remains will remember." I saw Noah stand upon the deck, rain beating against his face. He prayed not for escape, but for understanding. He said, "Lord, let the end become beginning. Let the cleansing not erase, but restore." The voice answered him, though not in thunder. It spoke through the rhythm of the storm. "When the flood ceases, plant memory. When the ground dries, build altar. For every judgment must end in worship." 40 days passed, and the ark drifted through silence, thick as morning. The world below had forgotten its own shape. Mountains hid beneath waves. The sun withdrew. Only the stars remembered their appointed paths. Inside the ark, darkness became teacher. The family learned patience, as the first family once had in the cave. Each day began with prayer and ended with gratitude. Noah told his sons, "The flood is not against us. It is for us. It washes away the voices that deceived the mountain. It silences the music that lured the faithful." The voice said, "Remember this. Renewal always begins with removal. What is drowned makes space for what must live." When the waters at last began to rest, the ark came to settle upon Ararat, a mountain whose stones still carried the scent of Eden's dust. The door opened, and new air rushed in, cool and clean. The wind carried no corruption. Birds soared again. Noah stepped upon the earth, and I saw him fall to his knees. He kissed the ground and built an altar of stone. Fire descended from the unseen realm and consumed his offering. The smoke rose straight into the sky as though the earth itself exhaled relief, and the Eternal spoke, "Never again shall water consume all flesh. The covenant that began with Adam shall now bear the sign of rainbow, each color a vow, each arc a bridge between wrath and grace." I saw the rainbow span the heavens, vibrant, alive, shimmering with intelligence. It was not merely light refracted, but light remembered. Within its bands were written the names of all who had endured through obedience. I heard it hum, a sound older than language, the tone of restoration. Yet even as peace returned, the shadow waited. For evil does not die with drowning. It sleeps beneath the surface, waiting for forgetfulness to wake it. Generations multiplied. Men spread once more across the earth. They built cities again. They raised towers again. And once more, pride whispered. The voice said, "The flood cleanses the soil, but not the heart. Only revelation can renew the soul." I saw the Tower of Babel rise, stone upon stone, ambition upon arrogance. They said, "Let us reach the heavens." But heaven cannot be reached by height, only by humility. The tower cracked beneath the weight of its own boast. Language scattered, unity shattered. Confusion became the new flood. Yet amid this noise, a remnant still remembered. From that remnant came Abram, called from Ur, carrying the seed of the same covenant that had crossed every storm. The voice said, "The story continues. From Adam to Noah, from Noah to Abraham, from covenant to covenant, the pattern holds. The faithful are few, but their remembrance keeps the world alive." I asked within the vision, "Will the floods never cease?" And the voice replied, "As long as hearts drift, cleansing will come. But one day a greater ark will appear, not of wood, but of spirit, and those who enter it shall not drown, but awaken." The vision turned. I saw through ages yet unborn. I saw deserts bloom and empires fade. I saw the bloodlines of Seth weave through history like threads of gold hidden within coarse fabric. Prophets rose, kings fell. The covenant never died. The rainbow still burned in the unseen sky, even when men no longer looked up. The voice said, Understand this mystery. The flood was not the end, it was rehearsal. It was the mirror through which creation saw its own need for redemption. What water began, Spirit will complete. The scene dimmed. I saw once more the cave of treasures, still standing though centuries had passed. Its stones bore the marks of every generation. Within it the small fire still glowed, the same flame that had guided Adam, the same spark that Noah carried in his heart. The voice spoke one last time, clear and solemn. The flood recedes, but the call remains. Mankind will seek again the mountain, and when the final covenant comes, it will not be written in stone or sealed in rainbow, but inscribed upon the living soul. Then the vision faded into stillness, and I was left with the sound of distant water, whispering of beginnings that have no end. The waters had withdrawn, yet the memory of their roar still haunted the valleys. The air was clear, but beneath its peace lay the pulse of something forgotten. I beheld the sons of Noah spreading across the land, sowing seed, building homes, and naming nations. The promise of the rainbow still glowed in the unseen realm, yet men no longer looked upward. The voice said, "Cleansing restores the world, but remembrance must restore the heart." I saw generations pass, and with each one, reverence thinned. The covenant that had been sealed by fire and water was whispered less, prayed less, honored less. Pride returned like grass after rain. Nimrod rose among men, strong in stature, greater in ambition. His eyes were sharp with hunger, his words smooth with power. He gathered the nations and said, "Let us build a tower that touches heaven. Let us make a name that no flood can erase." I saw the tower rising from the plain, stone upon stone, dream upon defiance. Its base was unity, but its purpose was rebellion. The voice said, "They seek to reach heaven without bowing to it." Angels watched from the heights, silent, sorrowful. The higher the tower grew, the darker its foundation became. For no man can ascend while forgetting the one who gives assent. Then came confusion, sudden and unseen, tongues twisted, meanings fractured. One called to his brother, and his brother no longer understood. The sound of unity turned to chaos. The tower stood unfinished, a monument to memory lost. I felt the sadness of heaven, not anger but ache. The voice said, "When language divides, spirit must speak again through revelation." I was taken beyond Babel. I saw deserts stretched like scrolls of gold, mountains heavy with silence, and in that stillness a man called Abram. His tent faced the stars, his heart faced eternity. The voice said, "Behold the next keeper of the covenant. Through him, the promise will breathe anew." Abram's name carried the echo of Adam's longing and Noah's obedience. He heard a call, not with his ears, but with his soul. "Leave your land," the Eternal said. "Walk toward a country that I will show you. I will make of you a blessing to all nations." I saw Abram rise in the night. The moon cast a thin light upon his path. He took nothing of the old idols, only faith. The journey began not with direction, but with trust. I followed him through plains and deserts, through hunger and fear. Wherever he pitched his tent, he built an altar. Each altar glowed like a fragment of Eden reborn. The voice said, "The covenant is not a place, but a pattern. Wherever man remembers, the presence returns." I saw Abram tested as Adam once was, yet he did not fall to the serpent of doubt. I saw famine come, and still he prayed. I saw kings rise against him, and still he gave honor to the unseen. I saw him look to the heavens one night when hope seemed thin, and the Eternal said, "Look toward the stars. So shall your descendants be." And I saw in those stars the entire lineage of faith, shining as witnesses to an unbroken vow. But as light grew, shadow followed. The same spirit that once deceived Eve and corrupted Cain moved again across generations. Empires rose from Babel's ashes. They built walls higher, crowns heavier, temples grander, yet in all their grandeur they forgot the simple fire of obedience. The voice said, "Knowledge without reverence becomes pride. Power without remembrance becomes corruption." I was shown Egypt, land of river and stone. Its priests spoke of gods born from sun and soil, yet behind their chants I heard echoes of the lost covenant. Truth had been buried, not destroyed. It slept beneath symbols and myths, waiting for awakening. The same river that had once mirrored Eden now reflected pyramids. The same hands that once tilled soil for worship now built monuments for vanity. Yet even here, divine memory hid within the mystery of time. I saw scrolls sealed in chambers of darkness, writings older than the dynasties themselves. The voice said, "The knowledge of the first age is not lost. It waits in silence for those who can see beyond empire." I was taken deeper into the vision. I saw prophets walking unseen among nations, carrying sparks from Adam's altar. Some were mocked, others slain, yet each carried light forward like hidden fire through wind and storm. Their names were few, their faith unshaken. They whispered of the coming restoration, when the word itself would walk again among men. I felt the pulse of history turning, slow as the rotation of stars. Every fall was answered by a rise, every flood by a promise, every exile by a return. The Eternal never withdrew. He only waited for remembrance. The voice said, "Understand this mystery. The covenant is a thread woven through all generations. It cannot be broken, only forgotten. And when men forget, the earth groans until memory awakens again." I saw Abram's descendants multiply. Some kept the flame, others traded it for idols of silver and law. Prophets rose to call them back, their voices like trumpets in dry valleys. Some listened, most turned away. I saw the tower rising from the plain, stone upon stone, dream upon defiance. Its base was unity, but its purpose was rebellion. The voice said, "They seek to reach heaven without bowing to it." Angels watched from the heights, silent, sorrowful. The higher the tower grew, the darker its foundation became. For no man can ascend while forgetting the one who gives assent. Then came confusion, sudden and unseen, tongues twisted, meanings fractured. The covenant that began in garden, that survived through cave and flood, that passed through ark and altar, will one day take form in flesh. The word will remember itself within man. I felt the gravity of that prophecy. It was not yet time, but it was near. The voice grew softer, like wind through cedar. "Tell those who hear," it said, "that covenant is not history but heartbeat. Every prayer spoken in truth calls Eden nearer. Every act of faith rebuilds what the flood washed away. The rainbow still glows above, though eyes have forgotten where to look." Then the vision dimmed. I saw the stars again above Abram's tent, uncountable, unending, burning with silent intelligence. Each one was a soul that would awaken when the final covenant came. And the voice whispered once more, "The journey continues. The promise stands. The world waits for remembrance." I saw the ages unfold like scrolls of fire, each one inscribed with the rise and fall of nations. The covenant moved through them all, unseen yet unbroken, carried by the few who still remembered. Empires rose like mountains, and just as quickly they fell into the dust of their own pride. The voice said, "The hand of God writes history not in ink, but in consequence. Every act, every choice, every heart is a line within the divine text." I was shown kingdoms of iron and stone, thrones lifted high and toppled by the same arrogance that built them. Yet amid all the noise of men, I saw one place where the covenant still breathed with quiet power. It was a land of red earth and ancient altars. Ethiopia, cradle of remembrance. Its mountains shimmered with the light not of the sun, and within its highlands, prayers older than empire still rose like incense. The voice said, "Here the memory was kept pure. Here the flame never bowed to Rome nor to sword. The rivers that run through this land carry the echo of Eden." I saw monks robed in white, walking through shadowed valleys with scrolls pressed to their hearts. Their lips moved in the sacred tongue of Gears, the language that had once whispered across Adam's altar. In their monasteries carved from living rock, they guarded the lost books, the book of Enoch, the Jubilees, and the hidden writings of Adam and Eve. Their voices rose in chant, not for conquest, not for fame, but for preservation. I felt the weight of centuries pressing down, yet these voices did not yield. Empires tried to silence them, but the Spirit hid their songs in stone. The voice said, "Truth cannot die. It only sleeps until the appointed hour." I saw Rome rise, cloaked in religion, yet hollow in spirit. Councils gathered to decide what words of heaven were permitted and which would vanish. They declared what was canon and what would be forgotten. And the first to be silenced were the writings that carried Africa's heartbeat. The truth that man was formed not for empire but for covenant was hidden beneath the robes of conquest. I saw scrolls burned, temples looted, tongues forbidden. Yet deep in the highlands of Ethiopia, light continued to breathe. The priests guarded not only the words but the rhythm of faith. They spoke of Adam's exile not as a fall but as a prophecy. They taught that every soul carried the memory of the garden, and that redemption was not escape from earth but the restoration of its purpose. The voice said, the Ethiopian church was not born of Europe's hand. It was born of covenant, sealed before the councils, untouched by empire. I saw the ancient manuscripts unfurl before me. Their ink shimmered like stars seen through water. They spoke of the days after Eden, of the struggle between spirit and shadow, of the promise that God would one day walk again among men. Each word was alive, each line pulsed with memory, and I understood that this was why the world sought to bury it. For knowledge is power, and power freed from empire is dangerous to every throne of pride. I saw ships upon the sea, carrying crosses upon their sails, yet chains in their holds. I saw lands divided by greed, faith twisted into conquest, and scripture used as weapon. But amid that darkness, I also saw light moving quietly through those same waters. The blood of the faithful mingled with the salt of the ocean. Their songs of deliverance became the hymns of generations unborn. The voice said, even captivity becomes a conduit when the soul remembers its source. I saw the sons and daughters of Africa scattered across continents, their spirits torn yet unbroken. The same exile that began in Eden repeated itself in their flesh. But I also saw angels walking beside them, unseen yet near, carrying the memory of the first covenant through the chains of history. The cave of treasures was no longer stone but heart. The flame still burned within. I felt the ache of generations crying for identity. I heard the whisper rise from the soil of every land they touched. We are not forgotten. We are not forsaken. Our roots are older than captivity. Our covenant older than empire. The vision widened. I saw the modern age, gleaming yet hollow. Knowledge increased, but wisdom thinned. Men reached again for the heavens through machines of light and code, yet the same Babel spirit guided their hands. They built towers not of stone, but of data, seeking again to replace the eternal with their own reflection. The voice said, the rebellion of technology is but the echo of Babel. The pattern repeats until the heart remembers. Yet in this very age of forgetting, the lost books began to rise again. I saw them uncovered from dust, translated, spoken, shared. Their words moved like fire through the digital wind. They called to the weary, to the exiled, to the broken, and those who had ears began to hear. I saw faces lifted, eyes opened, hearts burning with recognition. The voice said, truth emerges when the world is most ready to deny it. It comes not to destroy, but to awaken. I looked again toward Ethiopia. Its mountains still shone, its rivers still carried light. The ancient manuscripts rested in sanctuaries untouched by time. They were not relics, they were living witnesses. They waited for those who would read them not with intellect but with remembrance. And I understood. The lost book was never lost. It was hidden until faith became mature enough to receive it. The voice grew calm, like wind through cedar leaves. Tell them, it said, that heritage is not history, it is identity. What began in Africa will return through Africa, for out of the land where man was formed shall come the remembrance of what he was created to be. I saw the rainbow blaze once more above the highlands, its colors deep as prophecy. and beneath it the people stood, faces lifted, voices raised. They were not singing of chains, they were singing of covenant. And the words of their hymn moved through the earth like thunder made of light. Then the vision closed. The silence that followed was not emptiness, it was expectation. For truth, once remembered, cannot be silenced again. The vision faded into stillness. The air around me shimmered, not with light, but with knowing. The voice that had guided me through the ages no longer spoke from beyond. It spoke from within. The line between what was revealed and what was remembered vanished. The covenant had not been shown to me. It had awakened inside me. The garden, the cave, the flood, the mountain, the tower, the exile, and the return were not separate stories. They were one breath unfolding through time, one pulse repeating through every soul that ever longed for home. The presence that once walked among trees now walked within consciousness. The flame that burned upon Adam's altar now burned behind the ribs of every living being. The voice said, "You have not traveled through history. You have walked through remembrance." The silence deepened, yet it was alive. Every moment of creation seemed to hum with one truth. Man was never abandoned. The exile was never punishment. It was the long path of awakening. Every fall had its mirror in a rising. Every loss hid a seed of return. The earth itself was a sacred manuscript, and every soul a verse in its unfolding song. I understood then why truth must sometimes be hidden. Light revealed too soon blinds the eye. But once the heart ripens, what was buried returns as revelation. The last book was not only parchment preserved in Ethiopia's hills. It was the record written in the human spirit, the memory of divine origin waiting to be read again by those who dare to look inward. The voice grew gentle, almost human. "Remember," it said, "the cave was not their grave, but their beginning. The flood was not their end, but their cleansing. The covenant was not their duty, but their inheritance. All that was still is, for I am that I am." The words echoed through every chamber of thought, through time, through flesh. I felt them settle like light upon water. The covenant was not a history to recall, but a frequency to embody. The presence desired not worship born of fear, but remembrance born of love. That was the final mystery. God does not dwell in temples of stone, but in awareness restored to holiness. The earth grew still. The sky above my spirit brightened with a calm beyond sight. The gates of Eden had never been locked. They had only been forgotten. And now, the key was remembrance. The same voice that once called to Adam still whispers in every hour of silence, "Walk with me." The journey that began in exile ends in return. What began in darkness ends in dawn. The story closes, yet it does not end, for creation itself continues to unfold through awakened hearts. And as the final light rose across the horizon of spirit, the words came again, clear as morning wind. "You are not cursed. You are chosen. You are not forgotten. You are remembered." Then all was quiet, and within that quiet was everything Eden restored, covenant renewed, and the eternal flame burning without shadow within the soul of man.